instant knowledge from all over the world. Absolutely all kinds of things are changing that make life appear to be better for those that at least can participate in that stuff. But can you actually dominate the way things happen? Not unless you have wealth. That certainly seems to be necessary no matter what kind of government you have. So the criticism that he has still follows along Marx's criticisms, that you end up with the capitalist class owning everything, and as a result their wealth builds and everybody else's declines, so that they have more and more power and everybody else ends up with less. And eventually, says Marx, through this dialectical process, what you're going to have is an untenable situation among the workers, who are then going to strike or even violently overthrow the capitalist owners and replace it. Well, that's actually happened, so to speak, in a couple places. They're really horrible examples. 1917, the Lenin-led Marxist rebellion threw over the czars and his family, and eventually actually assassinated the whole family, as everyone is probably familiar. And what did they do? Did they replace the czarist regime with something better? No. They were clueless criminals, basically, that took over, and as a result, things only got worse. They tried to impose state control of things, but essentially just made life worse for everyone in Russia. You can ask Russians about that. And by the way, they haven't built themselves out of that situation yet. It's pretty obvious that with President Putin, you have the same kind of system imposed on people, and it's just absolutely unbearable and unremovable because of the way it works. In 1989, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was lots of thought that would be the end of that kind of thing, and this is the gentleman that argued that in his book, The End of History and the Last Man, which basically argued in a very Hegelian way that free democracy, capitalistic society was the format of a society in the future, that no other country, no other competitive model was going to be even close to the success of democracies that are free market capitalistic societies. Guess what? Actually, things reversed not too many years ago because a lot of the societies were not able to climb out of the situation. You end up, by the way, one of his books was about the attempt to attack Iraq and build a democracy in Iraq. Let me get to his books. I haven't read. Ooh, this is new stuff. The ad stuff. Wikipedia is neat. It keeps growing. So, falling behind, the gap between Latin America and the United States, America at the crossroads, state building, our post-human futures. Thinking about what kinds of things does technology seem to promise for us? Perhaps not a human future, but a post-human future. America at the crossroads, falling behind. Trust, the Great Disruption, our post-human future. Where's state building? Okay, I guess it's state building. But his point was that the attempt that the United States had, he was a neocon, if you're familiar, that's a neoconservative. He was a follower of Strauss, was a professor in the University of Chicago, although he actually taught longer in the New School in New York before he started teaching in Chicago. Leo Strauss. But in any case, the idea that the U.S. government had that we could attack Iraq, get rid of Hussein, and instead replace him with a democracy. Francis Fukuyama pointed out that that's not going to work. You actually have to do what Hegel said and go through stages before you can have a liberal democracy. You have to be able to bring children up in a liberal democracy with an education, as Jefferson kind of argued. You need a society that's educated and knows the issues in order for them to vote properly, in order to have a democracy that's functioning, right? Well, you're not going to be able to do that in a society that doesn't have an educated populace, right? And that's essentially what the United States tried to do. We tried to build a top-down democracy, and we did that not only in Iraq, but we also tried to do that in Afghanistan, and I'm sure some of you have been there, and you could see the results. I remember one of the books that was fascinating was by a British author who walked across the country of Afghanistan after the first conflict with us, and so was able to literally walk across. He spoke Farsi, and as he walked across, he was at one point where an American arrived in a helicopter and everything was all set up. The American got out and spoke to the crowd in English, on camera, of course, and talked to them about how wonderful the new democracy was going to be, with them all participating in their democracy. And they got back in the helicopter and they flew away. No one in the crowd, of course, understood anything in English. Plus, he being in that society, having walked across and meeting all these people, knew absolutely that was not going to impact this society at all. They were so impoverished. They were sheep herders and goat herders and small farmers, mostly opiates, by the way. And as a result, none of the things that he was talking about was essentially going to happen in the society. Women were not going to have the right to get an education. They weren't going to have a vote. The men weren't going to have a vote. No one even thought, that voting was something. It was not even possible. You have to work through stages for a society to become that kind of society that enables a democracy. So Francis Fukuyama, fascinating. Slavoj, I should play some Slavoj just for your listening pleasure. How many folks have listened to Slavoj so far? Isn't he a kick? Give me a video, please. A video. Oh, I broke my machine. Now it's not behaving properly. Video. Okay.
A lady helps you to.
I don't like.
There's one simple vision hack anyone can use to improve vision. So you can say goodbye to your optometrist for good.
It helps you to get up. Maybe you discover it's the love of your life. So although you know well it was a pure contingency, but the way you experience it, your life, if you're a romantic like I am, you are waiting for that moment. We have to live with this contradiction.
So philosophy is like falling in love.
Absolutely.
Slavoj Žižek, welcome to How the Light Gets In.
Thanks very much, although immediately, as a Hegelian, I must correct you. Something happens with Kant already, and then spelling Hegel, till that point of German idealism, light was associated with subjectivity. Subject is the light, darkness is outside in chaotic nature, but already there are some hints in Kant, his basic late text on religion within the limits of reason alone, Schelling, of course, and Hegel. The symbol
Schelling
of
is
the
the
inner
other name.
symbol, metaphor for the innermost core of the subject is night, darkness, the night of the world. Hegel says this wonderfully in some of his early texts, that it's this night, if you look somebody in the eye, you see objects but cut into pieces, just floating around, and everything emerges out of this. So I would say, how does the light get in a bad way? Light obfuscates this core of the subject, where both Hegel and Schelling refer to Jacob Böhme and other mystics.
Well, speaking of darkness, you have a famous Hegel quote that you like to use lately, which is that the owl of Minerva flies at dusk, at the end of something, at the end of a period. But Hegel has also this other quote where he says that philosophy is its own time comprehended in thought. And I was wondering, how do you reconcile those two quotes? Do you see
I
philosophy?
think, he even says, I think, both things in the same paragraph. What he means is that we live in a certain epoch. But all we can do in our thinking is to grasp the conceptual structure at its purest of this epoch. And for this reason, so philosophy always comes too late. Hegel is fanatically against any plans for the future and so on. And for this reason, I'm a total partisan of another materialist reversal of Marx into Hegel. Hegel was at this level very modest. He openly admitted, we can make some guesses and so on, but Marx was way too idealist for Hegel. Marx knew that generally, at least if you have the right subjective position, the exploited workers, we can somehow get, he was not a full determinist Marx, but the, let's call it, objective tendency of history. Like, if we don't screw it up, something may be better, socialism, communism awaits us. What Hegel would have said, and that's why we need Hegel. Where Hegel is at his best is, he takes the beginning of a great epoch, where there are all the promises about big achievement, and shows how more or less necessarily it turns wrong. His big example was, of course, French Revolution, freedom, terror. But I think Hegel would have felt like fish in its own water in later time. Look at the second half of 19th century. Not in the colonies, it's another story, but in Europe. It was a big era of progress. Even in Russia, they abolished serfdom. In Germany, Bismarck introduced first elements of global health care, retirement plans, suffragette, and so on. So the idea was things go on. Then you get the Great War, the First World War, which was, I think, the event, in some sense, much worse than Second World. Second World War was just an after effect. And sorry that I talk so much, but you know who is here? I must admit it, although he was not such a great theoretician as Marx. You know who, one of the few who predicted even the Second World War in 1880 already. Engels, in some letter, saw the signs. He says the way it goes now, Germany will want a stronger place in dividing colonially the world. So there will be a world war, and he was just lucky, I think, with an incredible foresight.
So, by the way, I have it on his authority that he doesn't use cocaine, but he has a tic that causes that constant nasal drip or whatever. But Slavoj Žižek, amazing contemporary. Lots of stuff, of course, out there on these guys. Thomas Piketty, by the way, has a book, the most recent one that I'm familiar with. If I get down to it here. capital and ideology, where if you listen to him long enough, you said ideology, like his French accent. What happens here is he evaluates the different kinds of social structures in various contemporary societies, such as Sweden, France, the United States, and so on. And what he's trying to show is that despite the nature of the economy and what seems to be a statistical law about how growth is decreased now, right? You know, the reason where your rate of return is higher than the growth is because the growth that we experienced during the recovery after World War I, World War II, it slowed down, and so the rate of growth is roughly 3%, which he expects to be kind of, unless something happens, that's 3%, which means roughly that your